Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed doing the research on this. I learned a lot, and I look forward to sharing with you. It's that button, right?
Yeah.
So I first gave this talk for Seth's students, and he advised me to put in a trigger warning, and it's there's going to be some violent pictures for the anti-Vietnam War posters, and some we're going to talk about the murder of Fred Hampton and some other things. So I hope you know, if you're sensitive, you'll want to think about that. So most of the posters we're going to be looking at are either screen prints or offset. And I just love screen prints. I tend to call them silkscreen because the screen was originally made out of silk, but now it's made out of nylon, no, polyester. And there's different ways to do it. You can cut a stencil with paper, or you can paint on the screen with different kinds of glues or lacquers. You can just paint directly on the screen, or there is a photosensitive way where you go into the dark room. And this was a really important method of printing in the 60s and 70s. And it was something people could do at home. You can do it in your living room or in your garage. When I was a teenager, I had a silk screen in my parents' garage, and I printed T-shirts and stuff. And there's a number of collectives that we'll talk about that printed silkscreen posters and T-shirts. So I'm focusing on posters, but of course it was used for T-shirts also. And you'll notice how the colors blend together in this one. You'll see that a few times. You put the 2 or 3 colors on the screen, and the squeegee just mushes them together and makes this nice blending technique. And then, oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that when you make a photo silk screen, they had to crank up the contrast. And I was able to find a photo here. You can't have grays very easily. So you can see how they would crank up the contrast in order to make a silk screen then. And so it has this distinctive look. The other major form of printing was offset. And offset was for a professional printer, and they could make many, many more copies than a silk screen. Sometimes what happened is that a collective or an artist would make a silk screen, and then it got so popular, the demand was so high, they'd take the same design to a printer and print even more in offset. So I'm focusing on political posters, but I wanted to mention that there were a lot of other posters during this time, and the psychedelic rock poster is really famous for this period, and I love those. I'm not going to go into it. Seth gives a really excellent talk on psychedelic art, but here's just a couple of examples. And this is, I don't think this was ever made as a silk screen, but the silk screen style was so popular and so identified with the counterculture that when they did the stage play the poster was made to look like a silkscreen poster. It was probably done on offset. And I also wanted to mention that silkscreen was being used in fine art, and Warhol was probably the most famous for that. So the first I'm going to start with is Paris of 1968. It was a period of civil unrest throughout France and had lasted 7 weeks with demonstrations, general strikes, and the occupation of universities and factories. And at the height of the events, which has become known as May 68, the economy of France came to a halt. The protest reached such a point that political leaders feared civil war or revolution, and the national government ceased to function after President Charles de Gaulle secretly fled France to Germany. And the protests spurred movements worldwide with songs, graffiti, posters, and slogans. The unrest began with a series of student occupation protests against capitalism, consumerism, American imperialism, and other institutions. There was heavy police repression of the protesters, and France's trade unions called for sympathy strikes, which spread so quickly it involved 11 million workers, which was more than 22% of the population of France. And the movement was characterized by spontaneous and decentralized wildcat strikes. It was the largest ever general strike ever attempted in France. Anyway, the strikes were met with forceful confrontation by both university administrators and police, which only inflamed the situation further. The center of the posters was the École des Beaux-Arts, which was a prestigious art school in Paris. And the school's students and teachers occupied a 300-year-old stone structure on the left bank, and they held meetings, but they also turned it into an artist's workshop where they created protest art using silkscreen. And they made hundreds of these posters and posted them in the streets of Paris. In keeping with the utopian ideals of collective work and autonomous authorship, the artists labored together to conceptualize, design, and write slogans for posters. Someone would say, "We need a poster that talks about immigration." Then someone else would propose a design, and someone else would come up with a slogan, and then a committee would discuss it, and then together they would turn it out. So as you see, the posters are unsigned, and they printed hundreds and sometimes several thousand copies and taped them to lampposts and walls. Then the police caught on, and they raided the school, and the students were expelled. And so they snuck off somewhere else, I don't know where, to make more posters. And here's a poster decrying the police shutting down the school. And as you can see, it was very easy to do color variations with the silkscreen. You could just wash it off and print it with different colors. So many of these posters have color variations. And this one, they were throwing cobblestones. It got quite violent. but they're just wonderful posters, and they just inspired everybody all over the world. And I was interested to find out that the symbol of the raised fist goes back at least to the 1910, maybe earlier, as a symbol of the workers' struggle. So the next section is anti-Vietnam War posters. And the Vietnam War began in the 50s, but the opposition really started in 1964. And so many young men were being drafted, and that then it became very popular to protest among, and this was one of the most famous of the posters. There were news photos coming from Vietnam that just shocked people, the violence, and this helped push the protest. And you will notice today, wars today, they tend to restrict these kinds of photos. You don't see so many, not because people aren't dying, but because the government and the news agencies don't let these be shown so much. So there were a lot of students working on posters, and again, posters are often anonymous. There's several reasons for them being anonymous. One is that you could get in trouble for posters. Two is that sometimes people were idealistic, that they didn't want to be the artist genius. They wanted it to represent the whole movement, or people were working together as a collective. But another reason they're anonymous is because today on the internet, people share JPEGs of stuff all the time without crediting the artist, without giving any source material. And so when I'm researching and trying to find out information, like I have to search and search and search, and I can't find the artist's name. And that's a pet peeve of mine, is people posting art without crediting the artist. So I say, artist, write your name on your work when you put your JPEG up if you want to be credited. This isn't a poster, but a pamphlet. This was The Days of Rage, were a series of violent actions taken over the course of 3 days in October of 1969 in Chicago, and was organized by the Weatherman faction of the SDS. And they didn't turn out the way people expected. There was a low turnout of protesters and enormous numbers of police that made the demonstrations more violent than originally intended. And then afterward, people on the left had quite a bit of disagreements about it. Anyway, there were a lot of student posters and posters by groups, and then there were some professional illustrators that got, because the anti-war movement became so popular, professional illustrators got interested in making posters. So I'll show some by professionals. And not all of them were even American. This one was obviously designed as a silkscreen poster, and you can see the imperfections around the edge, like especially the top right corner. You can see where it didn't print all the way, and Seymour was a professional, and he could have corrected that, but he wanted it to look homemade. Here's another poster he did that's not a silkscreen and is very tight. So you can see the change in style. And here's another one by a professional design group. And Wes Wilson did a psychedelic style poster here that you can hardly read. You can hardly read it. And then Tommy Unger did some rather shocking and striking posters. And I don't know if these are silkscreen or probably offset. So the next group is going to be the Black Power movement, which is mostly the Black Panther Party, though there were other groups. And they had originally considered using the fist to be their logo. But then they settled on the Black Panther. And it has a really interesting story how they came up with their logo. The Black Panther Party was founded in 1966 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who met at college. And it was a revolutionary organization with ideology of Black nationalism, socialism, and armed self-defense, particularly against police brutality. And it was the part of the Black Power movement which broke from the integrationist goals and nonviolent protest tactics of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and was active in the United States from 1966 till 1982 with chapters in all major cities. So the logo goes back to 1966 from the, how do you pronounce this, Lowndes County Freedom Organization in Alabama. And it was a political party running progressive African Americans for office. And they had a logo on their ballot to help illiterate voters. And this is also used in other parts of the world. I know it's used in Egypt, that there are people who can't read and write. And so in order to vote, the ballots will have pictures for each party so that you learn what is the picture of the party you want to vote for, and you check the box next to the picture if you can't read. And so it started out with this political party, and Stokely Carmichael said, "We chose for the emblem a black panther, a beautiful black animal which symbolizes the strength and dignity of Black people. An animal that never strikes back until he's back so far into the wall, he's got nothing to do but spring out. Yeah. And when he springs, he does not stop." Dorothy Zeller was a white Jewish woman working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also called SNCC. And she was approached by Stokely Carmichael, asking her to make a drawing of a Black Panther. And she refused at first because she wasn't confident in her drawing skills. So then they sent her husband, Bob Zeller, with a SNCC photographer to the Atlanta Zoo to take a picture of the Black Panther there. And Stokey said, the panther is lazy, so you might have to poke him to make him growl. Oh, it was James Foreman who sent them there. And James Foreman said, Bob, you poke him, and the photographer can maybe get a picture of a growl. See what you can do. So they did just that, and they got several pictures, and they went into the dark room and made a picture, and then they went back to Dottie, and they said, can you draw this panther? And she said, well, I went to art school, so I'll take a shot at it. And she said, what kind of picture do you want? And he said, make him growl and show some teeth. So she made a rough drawing. Then there's a second story that says that Stokey Carmichael came to Dottie, and he showed her a drawing of a panther that looked more like a cat, and asked her if she would clean it up and make it look more like a panther. And she found out later that it was based on the school mascot of a historically Black university in Atlanta. That's Clark Atlanta University. So this is what I could find. On the center and the left is the old logo, and on the right is their current logo. So there were two sources for this this is the official Black Panther logo. That was drawn by a Jewish white woman. Fred Hampton joined the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party in 1968, and he became the Illinois state chair. And he organized weekly rallies, taught political education classes, and set up a breakfast for children program, and helped establish the Free People's Clinic in Chicago's West Side. However, the FBI and the Chicago police planned his assassination, and they offered a plea deal to William O'Neill, and he infiltrated the Black Panther Party. He provided them with a floor plan of Hampton's apartment, and then he also gave Fred Hampton a drugged hot chocolate when he went to bed on December 3rd to make sure he wouldn't wake up. And at 4:30 a.m., the FBI raided the apartment and shot Fred Hampton while he was asleep. And they also shot member Mark Clark and wounded 4 others. So that was just absolutely horrific. This poster, I'm getting emotional, it rather upset me, says, you can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution. You can run a freedom fighter around the country, but you can't run freedom fighting around the country. You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. So another member was Angela Davis, and she was on the FBI's most wanted list. And I suppose the FBI poster was made on an offset, though I don't know what they were using. But anyway, her guns that she owned were used when they were trying to kidnap Superior Court Judge Harold Haley. And the resulting shootout left 3 men and 1 boy dead. including Jonathan Jackson and Judge Haley. And this event received intense media coverage, and there was a 3-month manhunt for Angela Davis, and or 2 months, I guess. So during the 2 months she was in hiding, many artists put out posters in support of her. And you will notice the slogan. It says, "Angela, sister, you are welcome in this house." And this slogan will come up later in my talk. So just to point that out. But numerous artists made posters in support of her. She was arrested in October of 1970 in New York City, and her trial began in 1972 and drew international attention. And in June of 72, she was acquitted of all charges and went on to have a career. So this is a Cuban artist living in New York City, and he had ties to Cuba still, and there were billboards in Cuba while she was on the run. So that's quite remarkable. Here, Eldridge Cleaver is running for president with the Peace and Freedom Party. I wanted to join the Peace and Freedom Party when I was a teenager. I don't know if I should do this aside, but there was no internet back then. It was really hard to get information on anything. And I guess I looked him up in the phone book, and I called some guy and I asked him if he would mail me literature, and he said they didn't have any literature, but he offered to speak at my school. So I went to my social studies teacher and proposed that we have a speaker from the Peace and Freedom Party, and she was absolutely appalled. But anyway, you'll see on the left, Lisa Lyons has done a variation of the Black Panther based on medieval heraldry. Huey Newton was co-founder of the Black Panther Party, and he got involved in a shootout that led to the death of a police officer. And in 1968, he was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. So there was a free Huey movement with posters. This one is probably offset because it has so much gradation of grays. Anyway, I have to talk about Emery Douglas. He was the official artist of the Black Panther Party, and his title was Minister of Culture. And he was very prolific, and most of his work was printed in the Black Panther Party newspaper, and so it was offset. I was talking to Seth about it. He probably did the black areas, he probably drew them, and then the colored areas were probably cut with a ruby lith. And the black areas are quite thick, which helps for registration, that if the registration is a little bit off, the black will cover it up. But it makes for a very striking graphic style. And so he did these very elegant posters that were included in the Black Panther newspaper. And he had a one-person show at the New Museum a few years ago. Then I'm showing you just some other posters. Rupert Garcia was making fun of the cream of wheat box here. And another one by Rupert Garcia. Some of the posters are anonymous and some are signed by individual artists. And later I will show you some posters that were done by collectives and signed by the collective. Anyway, this one was used as a record album cover. But so the Madam Bin Graphics Collective was a propaganda arm affiliated with the May 19th Communist Organization in the USA, and it was active from 1977 until about 1983. And one of their main goals was to provide material aid as opposed to just visibility or propaganda to the international movements it supported. So the collective often sold its work or used art to advertise its allies' meetings or actions. So as I mentioned, Angela Davis had these posters saying, "Angela, sister, you are welcome here." So Assata Shakur was a member of the Black Liberation Army that was an offshoot of the Black Panther Party. And she was convicted of being an accomplice in the first-degree murder of a state trooper during a shootout in the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973. So she was convicted in 1977 and with other felonies, and she was serving a life sentence. And she escaped from the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in 1979 and eventually surfaced in Cuba in 1984. So in 1979, they put out this poster, and I was living in a lesbian commune at the time, and we proudly had this poster up. And seemed like everybody I knew had this poster. It was a very popular poster, and it echoes the earlier poster of for Angela Davis. And she's still on the FBI's most wanted list. So I met the Madam Bin's graphics collective. I didn't know them well. I went to, I think, 2 of their meetings. And I have to say, they were white women. They were all women. They were white. I think they were all lesbian or mostly lesbian. And they were dedicated to supporting militant people of color. And they were very, very intense and very hard line and totally committed to their cause. And I'll have to admit, I was kind of intimidated by them, but they were very prolific. So this is the section I'm most familiar with. And again, some of the posters are anonymous and some are signed by individuals or collective. The one on the left has very tiny writing at the bottom that it probably credits the artist or the collective, but I haven't been able to find a JPEG that I can read. So if anybody knows where this is from, you can tell me later. I'd like to know. I love that poster. And I made a copy of it. I made a copy of it by hand with acrylic and marker pen that I carried in a protest. And now this poster is quite simple and plain, and I'm including it to show that even though a poster might not be artistically interesting or have imagery, it can still be a useful organizing tool. And consciousness raising was one of the main organizing methods of the women's liberation movement in the 60s and 70s. And the idea started in New York radical women. And as they were trying to determine what their next action would be, Anne Forer asked the other women to give her examples from their lives of how they'd been oppressed because she needed to raise her consciousness. She recalled that the labor movements of the old left had spoken of raising the consciousness of workers who did not realize they were oppressed. Another New York Radical Women member, Kathy Sarachild, picked up on Anne Forer's phrase. And Sarachild said that she had extensively considered how women were oppressed. She realized that the personal experience of an individual woman could be instructive for many women. And the consciousness raising was called by anti-feminists not political, personal problems, petty, that issues like housework and child care were considered petty, and what are you complaining about? And so they called them bitch sessions. So the slogan became "Bitch Sisters Bitch," and this poster was to remind them that their problems, that their personal problems of facing sexism was a political problem, and that talking about your personal problems had precedence in the Chinese Revolution and the Black Power and Civil Rights movement. This is probably, I'm showing mostly silkscreen, but this one was probably a linoleum cut. And it's a poster for abortion rights. And this is courtesy of the Red Stockings Archive, which you can visit online and find many other interesting things. The Red Stockings had I guess branch, you would call it, of Red Stockings artist. And this is a painting by Marjorie Kramer showing herself and other Red Stockings artists. And you can see in the background is that poster. See that poster? It's in the background of this painting. And they organized a newsletter. What is this stuff?
I don't know.
Oh, well. Anyway, they organized a newsletter, and here's the another poster by Lucia Vernarelli. And you can see on the left, I don't know if that is the community center or an office, but you'll see both of her posters. You see a poster on the right for the against the Vietnam War. And Anyway, posters were very much loved and used. Here's another poster from 1969. Our history has been stolen from us. Our heroes died in childbirth, from peritonitis, of overwork, of oppression, of bottled up rage. Our geniuses were never taught to read or write. We must invent a past adequate to our ambitions. We must create a future adequate to our needs. Here's some posters from England. This poster, my guess is that the poster on the left was made first by someone in the movement, and that later an illustrator working for Newsweek elaborated on it. I might be wrong, it might be the other way around. I don't know because I can't find any information about the poster on the left. Again, I don't know if the artist chose to be anonymous or whether it's just the habit of people posting art without crediting the artist on the internet. But I like this poster and I copied it. And you can see I cleaned it up my own way and I made the face look straight at you instead of up. And here's another poster. Poetry reading with Marge Piercy. Poetry was also a big part of women's liberation movement. Their beautiful, moving poems came out of that movement. Another poster for Inez Garcia, who fought back against a man that raped her and was charged with murder. So here's a poem. The poster's rather simple, and I very well might make my own poster for this poem. I think it could be much improved upon, but I love this poem. I'm going to read just the last part to you after I have a sip of water. The common woman is as common as good bread, as common as when you couldn't go on but did. For all the world we didn't know we held in common all along. The common woman is as common as the best of bread and will rise and will become strong. I swear it to you. I swear it to you on my own head. I swear it to you on my common woman's head. And one of the reasons I love that poem is when I was a teenager, I first heard about women's liberation. It was the 60s. I was a teenager. I heard about women's liberation from the liberal media. And the first message I got was that liberated women were better than other women. And I was vain enough that I liked to think that I was better than other women. And then when I grew older and I started to educate myself and read the original writings of women's liberationists, that I learned about the pro-woman line. And I learned that women's liberation was for all women and it was all of us together, and that I'm not any better than any other woman. And that was so important to me, and so deeply moving to me. So you can see there's quite a variety of styles. So this is by one of my friends who's with us today, and hope she'll talk about it later. There was a very I should have written notes down for this. There was a very dramatic event that was the Women's Liberation takeover of Rat newspaper. Rat was an underground newspaper and was male dominated, and they published a lot of porn. It was kind of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and a little bit of anti-war. And women's liberation groups marched in there and said, "We're taking over." And Sue Szymanski did some covers. I remember I saw the cover on the left for the first time when I visited the Lesbian Herstory Archives, which is out in Brooklyn now. And they had a box of the women's liberation issues of Rat. And I just love that cover on the left. It's so emblematic of that time period. And you have the white women's liberationist on the left, and the Black Panther woman in the middle, and the Vietnamese woman on the right, and they're all running like they're ready to go to battle. And it really felt like that at the time. And Sue told me the picture on the left, someone submitted the drawing at the bottom, and Sue doesn't even know the name of the artist. Somebody gave it to Sue and asked her if she would draw a witch flying over them. Witch was the acronym for Women's International Conspiracy from Hell, which was one of the groups that was part of the takeover of Rat that included Robin Morgan. Here's another poster by Sue for a Yippie event made with cut paper. Very elegant and striking. And here's a block print poster, and I just love the militancy of it. Feels very much of the time period. So the next story I want to tell you is really interesting. The story is published in the Red Stockings book, Feminist Revolution. And Shirley Boccaccio, who signed her work Virtue Hathaway, she was a single mother, a divorced woman with children, and was having a hard time making ends meet, and started making posters. And this one poster sold very well, and she started making enough money that she could buy new shoes for her kids and a bicycle, and she was feeling pretty good. And it was offset and sold all around the country. And then she went to a store, and they said, "Oh, we aren't going to take your poster anymore. We're getting the same poster for cheaper somewhere else." And she said, "What?" And she bought one, and found the name of the company. And so she got a lawyer to sue for copyright infringement because she had registered this with the copyright. And it was a huge struggle. And they were trying to get her to take a settlement, and she didn't want to settle. At one point, she and her lawyer met with the CEO of the company, and she's a really good storyteller. You should get Feminist Revolution and read the story in full, but I'll read just this one part. Let me have a sip of water. So her lawyer says, my client does not believe that you sold only 200 posters. From her experience with the sales in Los Angeles, it would seem you sold many times that number. And the CEO, he leans over and glares and says, we have sold only 200 posters, and we will pay no more than $200 to your client, and the royalty will be no more than 5 cents, and I suggest you accept that. I retain a battery of attorneys who do nothing else except fend off artists such as your client who bother me with their stupid copyright claims. My lawyers are very good and very well paid. At this, he laughed, and her lawyer shrunk to inches in his chair. And he said, the CEO says, you are just wasting your time if you try to bargain with me. Then the CEO leans back with this satisfied smile on his face and said, this reminds me of the time I had with the Mothers for Peace. They had a poster with this big flower drawn on it, and the words, war is not healthy for children and other living things. And it looked like a kid had done it. Well, anyway, we heard it was selling pretty good, so we picked up on it and started selling the thing. Now, the way I look at it, we were actually doing the mothers a favor by getting their message around more and better. We have a first-rate distribution system, and well, those movement outfits are just amateurs. They came to us so mad about their damned copyright. They didn't want to deal with us or anything, so finally we had to quit selling it. You know what I call those mothers now? His eyes narrowed and the corners of his mouth dropped. Mothers for cash. So I don't think she won a lawsuit against them, but she wrote a book later, and you can see her. She made this poster as a young woman, and here she is much older, signing her posters. On the right is, she made a number of posters. I couldn't find very many. On the right is one. It says, if it's so easy, you do it. The house husband. And here's one rather cynical poster, says mother love. And those are the only two I could find by her. Here are 3 posters by Monica. I'm going to mispronounce her name, Suge. And the one on the left is Silkscreen.
Her name is Shu. I met her, so I know.
Thank you. The one in the middle I love so much, and it's a quote from Robin Morgan, and it's her essay, Goodbye to All That. Women are the real left. We are rising with a fury older than any force in history. This time we will be free or no one will survive. Power to all the people or to none. Women's liberation. The poster on the right, when I first saw it, it shocked me deeply. I had never thought of God as a woman. I had never thought of giving birth as creation. It was a completely new idea to me, and it blew me away. It's a painting, but she wrote that she printed it as a poster and carried it in protest. Nancy Spiro is a fine artist, and her prints, they're silkscreen prints and other printing techniques, and they weren't made as political posters in the sense of most of the posters I'm showing here, but I wanted to show you her work because it's so beautiful and it is very political. She did a lot of anti-Vietnam work as well, although that was more of a hand-painted one. And Kate Millett also made many fine art silkscreen prints. She didn't do political posters, as far as I can tell. She is a very important feminist writer, her most influential book being Sexual Politics. And she, like you can see here, made silkscreen prints, some of them with a lesbian theme, many of them with a lesbian theme. And she also made films and sculpture. She was part of the Fluxus movement while she lived in Japan and was friends with Yoko Ono. And she founded a women's art colony in Poughkeepsie. So now we're going to go into different feminist silkscreen collectives. The Chicago Women's Graphics Collective, I'm going to read a memoir written by Estelle Carroll. If you look at our posters, you will rarely see an individual's name on it because we decided that modern art had been done all wrong by men. That was based on egotism and the cult of the individual great men of art syndrome. So we decided to throw all that out, and art now had to be a collective experience. So every poster we created had to be done by committee, every single one. We had a system where any member of the collective would get a subject area or an idea or a phrase or an image and decide to do a poster. They would ask 2 or 3 members of the collective to be their assistants and help develop the idea. And then in little teams, they would physically create the poster in silkscreen. And it had to be a collective process. There was no way one single woman could really do it because we were using very primitive reproduction methods. And in silk screening, we needed at least 3 people to run the silk screen. The silk screened ones were all hand printed, no machines. If a poster was more than one color, it had to be hand printed for as many different colors as was in it. So it was very, very labor intensive. We could only print at a maximum 200 at a time because it totally taxed our physical strength and our space. Eventually, so many orders came in, We actually made some money from the sale of them. We were able to hire Salcedo Press, our favorite worker-owned print shop, to offset print in larger quantities. It was a very important part of Chicago Women's Liberation Movement Union in general, and helped give the organization a national presence. We were socialist feminists, making women, quote, equal to men in an exploitative capitalist society was not our goal. So besides the clearly feminist posters, we did posters about healthcare, the third world, labor, and other issues. So another women's collective was in England, and they put out a beautiful book a couple years ago. You can buy it online or at your favorite bookstore with reproductions of all their work. It's a great book. And I'm going to read a little from the book. And they have a website too. Both of these groups have websites. You can see their work online if you prefer. See Red Women's Workshop was founded by 3 ex-art students in 1974. We met through an ad placed in Red Rag, a radical feminist magazine, asking for women interested in forming a group to look at and combat the negative images of women in advertising and the media. See Red grew out of that meeting, and a collective was formed producing silkscreened posters for the women's liberation movement, as well as for community groups and others on request. Working collectively was central to See Red, as was sharing skills and knowledge. Members belonged to women's consciousness raising groups and were active in various radical and alternative organizations. In the early days, the posters were mainly produced about our own personal experiences as women, about the oppression of housework, childcare, and negative images of women. We also produced posters for community and other groups. For all our work, an idea would be discussed. A member would work on the design, bring it back for comment. Someone else might make changes and so on until the collective was satisfied with the end result. No one individual took credit. This was a concept many in the art world found hard to accept. Quality was important, and many hours would be spent on ensuring that only posters that were well printed and produced left our workshop. Our first premises was a squat in Camden Town, northwest London, but after a brick was thrown through the window, we moved to South London and eventually to Walworth Road. The premises were derelict, and all the renovations were carried out by our collective or by women in the building trades. The workshop was attacked on several occasions by the National Front. That was a fascist group similar to the Proud Boys. They were attacked with stickers, smashed doors, ink poured over the machinery, phone lines were cut, and they peed on their mail. The See Red Women's Collective on average consisted of about 6 women, but in all, about 45 women passed through the workshop during its lifetime. They got some grants, and they also had funding through the sale of posters and from donations. they all had part-time jobs or childcare commitments. And they got ink and paper acquired from firms closing down or through donations. And they finally closed in 1990. They were very, very prolific. And you can see all the different styles and subject matter they took up. It's really a beautiful book. If you can find it, I highly recommend the book. So the third group I know of is the Creative Women's Collective. And I could not find very much information about them. They were in New York City, and that's all I know about them and what some of their posters look like. Here's the one I showed in the beginning that shows a photo of their studio. Looks like they had at least 2 women. I'm not sure if those are the same 2 women in this poster, whether there's 4 women. This poster I owned. It was, when I lived in this lesbian commune, one of the members had a pile of these posters left over and gave one to me. And dummy me, I stapled it. When I moved out of the commune into my own apartment, I stapled this poster in my bathroom. And the steam from taking showers warped the paper and made the colored paper run. It was black ink on colored paper, original silkscreen poster, and I didn't take care of it. So I want to urge all of you to take care of your stuff. You won't know. It might be historically important. So anyway, as I mentioned before, I was able to find the photo this was made from, and you can see how the grays are lost and has this very distinctive look from being high contrast. And here's another example where you can take the same image and play with it with different colors and different text even. So they were very prolific. There's quite a few posters by them, but they don't have a website or a book out. And I hope somebody steps up someday and documents them more thoroughly. I did want to mention that International Women's Day was a very favorite theme for women's movement posters. There's lots of them. And I only have a couple from the gay rights movement. This is a really famous one. I think Peter Hujar is a well-known photographer, made this really gorgeous photo that was put on this poster and combined with a drawing by Suzanne Bevier. And then this is another really fun poster. So I just was gonna jump from 1979 to today, and I'm just gonna show a couple of things. Shepard Fairey's style, I don't think he makes silk screens, but it has a little bit of a feel of a silk screen, just the way the colors are simplified. And these are silk screens, but you'll notice that they're tighter looking than the old silk screens. And I think that's from digital, that they probably can manipulate them digitally to make them more sharp. And these are both from Just Seeds Collective. It's a collective, but they do credit the individual artist. And I wanted to mention the collectives, they didn't sign the name of an individual artist, but they did sign the name of the collective. So See Red would have See Red written on their posters, or the poster I owned had the name of the collective written on it. So that's an interesting issue, that they weren't completely anonymous. They had the name of the collective. I meant to say that before. So that's the end of my talk. I know I left a lot out. There's many, many more posters. I didn't cover all of the active movements of the 60s and 70s, but this is just an introductory talk to get you thinking about things. This is a list of the main websites. You can, if you can't write down all the information, you can just Google Red Stockings or See Red Women's Workshop, and you'll find, you'll find the website pretty easily. So I'd like to open it up to discussion and questions, and I'm really interested in what you have to say. I wonder if I can put Sue on the spot, since you were one of the artists, if you want to say anything about your work or anything about that time period, or
we have to unmute.
Oh yeah, let me see. Yeah, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Hi, everybody. The work that the whole question that you brought up of work being signed and unsigned, I was just interviewed about that. There's a book coming out about archiving collective work by folks connected through the Interference Archive. Jen Hoyer, who's a librarian and archivist. At the time, the idealism of the period, I mean, it was just an incredible period where stuff was happening every day, and we were in the streets, and we were writing, and we were drawing, and we were, some people, we were working at jobs and then doing stuff and staying up all night, and it was just continually going on. And they were like one group kind of segged into another. So like the Panther Defense Committee, who were supporting the Panther 21, overlapped with the RAD, and it overlapped with the Panther Defense Committee, and it was all a lot of the same people in New York. So the artwork that I did, both for The Guardian and for the RAT, wasn't signed. And all of the articles that were written were signed. And so what I'm thinking is that part of what was going on too is that the writers, writing was privileged over artwork.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so you had writers like Robin Morgan and Marge Piercy, who are wonderful, and their work will always be identified with them. But the artwork of the visual artists was not being identified with the visual artists. And in some publications, it was even clearer. Like when I worked at The Guardian, the editorial staff would be arguing about what should go on the front page until like 2 a.m. And so we didn't know what was going to go on the cover. And we had to figure out a cover and produce it, come up with with the imagery and produce it between 2 and 6 in the morning. And I was the only person who drew or did collages. I think Seth is nodding because he knows. And so there was this built-in kind of what do you call it? Think of gaslighting kind of thing going on. Putting the artist down, and you're not as important, and all that kind of stuff. So there's that aspect to it. The women's movement, the collectivity of a place like the Rat was a new thing. And kind of blending all in as a group and working collectively was a struggle. And there were people who eventually became the leaders and the people who had more say than other people. And that was part of the downfall of the whole thing. It was an ideal at the time. And I really believed in it, so I didn't sign anything back then. And it came back to bite me in the long run. Not because I didn't think it was a good idea, but other people, it became like a career building experience. And again, the writing as the art came out of collective knowledge that was developed by many, many people. And so you have these very important authors, and they didn't just pull the brilliant ideas out of their heads. They came out of collective discussion and being part of organizations where conflict had developed and people fought out for women to be able to be recognized and respected.
Kathy, Kathy Sarahchild, can I put you on the spot? Would you like to say anything, since you were also part of that period and I mentioned you? You see, where is she?
I see her, but I don't see her face.
I'm trying to find, how do I scroll down to?
Am I unmuted now?
Oh yeah, now you are.
Oh, good. I was trying to do it. Well, I really appreciated well, first of all, Tamara, thank you so much, and for everything you said. It was fascinating. I want to respond immediately to Susan, though, because I love your story about what happened to the artists, as opposed to, I would say, some of the writers. And it's really true in a way, though. Red Stockings went through a phase in this time you're talking about where the writers too began to not use their names. Now, I agree. I take your point. I think I disagree with you. And I never really liked the anonymous line, but I went along with it. Now, why didn't I like it? And why did I go along with it? I was confused. Some of the things I agree with what you said, that many people's ideas goes into a piece of writing, which is absolutely true. But I do think that the writer who pulls it all together, it's a certain amount of work. No one else sat down and pulled it all together. And I do think that deserves a credit in itself. And that work, it's a lot of work, and somebody did it. And I think after a while, if it's not acknowledged, that work might stop. And does stop, actually. But I don't know. Now Red Stockings does believe in recognizing everyone. In fact, there's a very good article by Pat Minardi that really raised my consciousness about this very thing you're talking about, and specifically geared to artists. Although she didn't make the point. I don't remember her making the point about the writers versus artists, which is a very interesting point I've never heard before, and certainly is true that you've made. But she raised my consciousness about the art, because it was so easy how it was not getting credit. It was so easy then, as you say, just to grab a piece of art off some flyer or some other thing and put it in your newspaper. We were doing a newspaper at the time, and you were dying to have some good material. And after I read her piece, we were much more careful about finding who the actual artist was. But I needed to read that. I needed to hear it, hear something like that. So I guess I believe that other people need to hear it also, but it makes a difference to say it and tell it and pass it on to people. So I guess those are my thoughts. I can't, it's just so interesting to hear from you. I hope, are you in New York?
No, no, I'm in Milwaukee.
Uh-huh.
And things happened like my artwork from the Rat was in like 3 or 4 different shows in New York last year. And I was notified of none of them.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh, God.
And so I notified some people, and some people corrected it, and some people who would be the people you would expect would correct it immediately didn't. I will not be pointing fingers, but people from the left. And one of the places was Cooper Union, and they.
Which one was that? Was that the exhibit?
Yeah.
What happened with that? What do you, because she was pretty good to the person who.
Yeah, we ended up planning to go out to coffee and talking about it, but we talked about it over the phone.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, it happens repeatedly because I didn't sign things. And
write up your experience. Would you write up your experience? I think it's very important. I can send you this article by Pat Minardi.
Oh, yeah. It's written up, and it's going to be in the book by the archivists from Interference Archives, which is one of the places, which in fact is the place that didn't put my name next to my artwork.
Uh-huh.
Strangely enough, and they knew it was mine.
Oh gosh, what is it?
So my artwork from the Rat is in just about every book on the Underground Press.
And you're Anonymous the woman in it. You're.
I'm not anonymous anymore.
Uh-huh.
I mean, people, you can look me up on the internet and the artwork shows up.
Oh.
Well, I find today on the internet that the websites just grab artwork from everywhere and don't credit anybody. And so many people share the art without crediting the artist that while I'm hunting to find the artist's name, I have to wade through all of the hundreds of websites that have shared it without crediting the artist before I finally find the website that does credit the artist.
I guess I think this, you know, coming from a background in the sciences, I guess I consider this issue of credit very important, no matter what kind of work it is. If you were associated with it, you know, if you helped to create it, your name should be on it. And other people have an obligation to make sure your name is on it. I mean, I will do that even when I create a Word file from a recipe in a cookbook or a recipe I found online. I credit, you know, the website or blog, you know, where I found it. I just think we all have to get in the habit of doing this. I mean, it's not that hard to do. And I think that by doing it and by modeling it, we can help get other people to be more systematic about it.
Hi. Yeah, I agree, but I think I was part of an art collective. I'm from New York, but I lived in the Bay Area in the 70s, and I was part of a feminist art collective. And I think there at the time, and I think that there was a confluence, a kind of tension between like leftist politics and feminist politics. So there was a pressure that you just do things for the people, at least in the environment I was operating in those days, where you do things for the people, and it's like you're just helping, you know, everybody in the struggle, so it doesn't really matter. Don't put your ego in it. But then there was the feminist thing, that women were unacknowledged and they needed credit for their work. But those two things seem to be conflicted. And I remember, like, there was a pressure: don't get too famous, don't sell out, don't make too much money. So there was that pressure always going on. But I remember doing a calendar, like a kind of women's calendar, and then I was supposed to get credit, I was supposed to get published, I was supposed to get paid for it, and I was very trusting. I didn't know about contracts or, you know, copyrights, and then I saw it like years later. I saw it up somewhere, and I had never gotten any credit for it. So you know, I very strongly believe, like everybody now, you know, get the credit, get your name. But I think it was a different mindset in the feminist movement, you know, initially, where you just weren't supposed to. And I just want to comment on some of the, I so appreciate this, Tamara, some of the artists that you highlighted. I lived in London and Paris in the mid 70s, and I was very much part of like the women's scene there, or at least meeting a lot of people. And I met Monica Shu, who was amazing, amazing woman. And she gave me, like you, I so relate to this, she gave me her poster of the woman birthing, you know, that one that you showed, and I didn't take very good care of it. It was an original poster. I could hit myself now for like, here it is now. I don't know what happened to it. And the other thing, the women's, the, what were they calling themselves? The Red Women in London.
See Red Women's Club.
Yeah. I don't think I met them, but I was in touch with a lot of feminist women in London, and the virulence, it was so pronounced. The male backlash against feminists was so pronounced there. Really, really violent backlash. And I remember going to a meeting where they were talking about women working and getting equal pay for equal work. And these guys were, these working class guys were like standing up and screaming and saying, you women, go back, take care of your babies, stop taking men's jobs, you're just taking men's jobs. I mean, they got hysterical. I thought there was going to be a riot at that meeting there. It was so much, even more than in this country. I just couldn't believe the virulence against women just claiming to be able to get paid for their work. So it's just, this whole presentation is just bringing up a lot of memories for me. And you know, being part of the anti-war movement too. So I appreciate that you did this. Your research was great. I really appreciated it.
Well, it was Seth that asked me to do this. He asked me, I made this for his classes. He has, he teaches at the School of Visual Arts and also for Mayday Space. And so he was the one that egged me on this time. But we were talking about stencils, and I said, well, silkscreen to stencils, and somehow that led to this talk. But
I would suggest the next time you give a talk, it might not be political, but on the rock and roll posters, especially like Fillmore East and Fillmore West, those were really ubiquitous. They were good.
Seth gives a talk on those. Seth gives a talk on the psychedelic
well, actually,
posters.
it's a talk for my comics students, because there's a whole body of comic book work that is really influenced by psychedelic posters. So I kind of But I also, the really interesting thing is that some of my students, I had this student who she said, I want to do the type of artwork I really liked when I was a kid, and she started doing these pictures of like rainbows and unicorns and all that stuff. And I said, wow, you mean like Peter Max? And she said, who's that? And she was looking at Lisa Frank, who I never heard of because I'm too old. Like Lisa Frank is after my time. But all the younger women, they were brought up, like little kids had Lisa Frank as their wallpaper next to their crib, and it all looks like psychedelic art. So I kind of produced for them a history of psychedelic art, what it was, where it came from, because it's sort of very odd is that, like, of course, psychedelic art was very transgressive, and, some of the people who started it didn't last very long, and
it was about drugs.
And it's been repackaged as this thing that is given to children, actually. It's seen as very innocent, so I thought that was very interesting. I did a whole presentation on that.
Yeah, well, talking about collecting, like, again, I live with people in San Francisco who had literally, because for a while I was living with this couple who were rock and roll, like minor rock and roll stars in the Bay Area. And they just had stacks and stacks of these posters. They just would get them every time they went anywhere. It was just like very casually, taped up to the walls and no big deal. And now, of course, all this stuff is now collector's items also. People
One thing about technique. Well, first of all, it's not just women that this happened to. You show the picture of the two different panther fists. One was like all blocked in, and one was linear. The linear one was by Bobby Chichorka.
Oh, thank you. See, I told you I couldn't find a name. Okay.
And was one of the very popular fists in the period. I mean, it was everywhere. I saw it first in the newspaper, The Movement in San Francisco. And Bobby was a really incredible illustrator.
Bobby was female?
No, I mean, he's a guy.
Oh, okay, Bobby.
Wasn't it Frank Chichorka? It was Frank Chichorka.
It's Frank. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
I forgot. It was a
He was a great artist, yeah.
Yeah, he's really good.
Worked with Snick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with the whole idea of the silkscreen, the first time I did a silkscreen was, I don't know if it was called Rubylith. I don't think so. But there was, you got a piece of blockout material and you cut it with a knife, and then you adhered it to the screen.
Yeah.
So that there were no gray tones, there were no intermediate tones. And also with the newspapers too, you had to use a dot screen. I remember that. So that in order to have a gray, you had to do basically a collage between the linear work and then these different densities of these dots that are on a sticky plastic adhesive. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why things looked the way they did. Then we had rudimentary darkrooms for photographs as well. And a lot of the photos didn't come out, the grays didn't come out too well. We had people running through the streets of demonstrations with a camera that they weren't really familiar with. And so in the dark room, people who were developing stuff would do what was called the line shot, where they increased the contrast to the point that all there was the black and white.
Yeah.
So that look also looked like a silk screen. It looked like the French posters. It looked like the Cuban posters. And it came out of the rudimentary kind of technology that we had.
Well, thank you for explaining that more clearly.
I wanted
that look. I just love that look. I mean, we don't have to do that anymore, but I I just love the way it looks.
I do too.
Uh,
Not everything is progress.
Well,
You know, I just, the Bobby, it's what you say about the Chorkas. Bobby was Frank's wife. They were a couple.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
I
knew
think
that
you
both.
mean Frank, but I thought as you were first speaking, oh, I thought to myself, oh, was Bobby an artist too? Did she also do but I didn't know.
No.
But just one point I wanted to make about the credit thing too. I have to go after this, but what I feel I came to realize, and we in Red Stockings agreed and everything, was that it isn't just a question of history and credit. If you don't know who's doing the work, you're not able to, I mean, if you're trying to persist as an organized force and as a collective, if you don't know who's doing the work, you can't get in touch with them
Right.
to ask that person to do more work when it's needed, when it's really needed. And that's a power. That work is a power for the movement.
Yeah.
And it's lost, it's dissipated. Like, I
It's
mean,
not just,
I first learned this when we were putting out this newspaper, and you really had to, I mean, it's a lot of work to put out a newspaper, and no one's getting paid, right? It's for the movement. So you really need to know who can do what. And if no name is ever attached to it, then that's lost. You know, so there's a practical significance too. And then there's the economic significance in terms of not only women getting the credit, but the particular woman, you can also get a job, right? If it's known. And, you know, credit means jobs. And someone else is getting the job for the work you did. You know, it's, first of all, it's not fair, but also it's not, I don't think it's good collectively, because that person can't go on to do more work. You have to get paid to eat, you know, and to go on doing the work, the political work, as well as the career work. So anyway, that's the point, that credit really has practical significance. It's not just a moral or a historical point, you know.
I found in the last 20 years, well, I met Seth about 20 years ago and started working with World War III. But once I started doing work and having my name on it, every project that I did led to an invitation to do something else that I had never done before. That was interesting and fun and led somewhere. And after RAT, I just stopped.
Wow.
I just didn't have a reason. I didn't have a place for my
That
work.
happened to the whole movement, I think. It just fell apart. There was this incredible burst of energy and participation that really had an impact. I mean, we were in all these books, whether it was anonymous or not. And just as an example, the name Red Stockings was out there in all these books for people, the masses of people, to get in touch with us so we could organize more. Right. And yet the organization fell apart right at that high point when we were reaching as many people as Ms. Magazine ever reached, you know. And yet they were the ones who survived because they had all the corporate funding and everything.
Right. And there went Robin Morgan and I not being friends anymore.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. I have to go and do some work with somebody else, but thanks a lot. It was great. And did you record it, Tamara? Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Great.
It's being recorded. Yes.
Yeah, I should put this up on YouTube. I gotta learn how to put.
Oh, great idea. Yeah.
On YouTube, but.
Is everyone cool with it, with them being in this video and it being put around? Because I think this is the best version of the talk that Tamara did because of all the discussion we had. Yeah,
would you be okay if I kept the discussion part on the YouTube?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
I didn't say anything controversial.
Okay. You know, there are some artists.
Have the truth come out, you know.
There are some artists who.
Everybody, I have to go, but thanks again. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Figure out how to leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a whole like the Beehive Collective. They don't credit individual artists for that group of artists. And there's another group, I haven't studied it much, but a group today, they call themselves Copy Left, and all their artwork is for free. I think Nina Paley does that, and I don't really understand. I should ask her. I don't really understand her. I don't understand how that works. Do you have anything to say about that?
I think, you know, it's funny because I've had dialogues with Kevin about this for years, that Kevin, I knew that Kevin had criticized our collective for the fact that we all retained rights to our material. And the first thing I thought when I heard that she was saying that was, if I had gone to the artists I worked with and said, you don't get to have your name on this and you don't get the rights to it, they never would have worked with me. You know, that the fact that
Kevin,
that they have a collective that will do that implies that they're part of a community that's very idealistic in the way that the people I worked with were not, and perhaps in the way that people Sue worked with at one point were. That if you have a really active movement with lots and lots of people in it, and it seems like the best thing in the world is to be in that movement, I can see how, maybe, I'm just guessing, that a lot of people don't think about that. And I think that, you know, you had a big anti-globalization movement that Kevin was part of, and maybe it seemed really cool to these kids to not have your name on it. At least that's what they said, you know. Whereas when we were organizing our magazine, it was like the peace group in my college was 5 people, and like you know, everybody wanted something besides being an activist, because being an activist was going to get you nothing, you know. And so I think it depends, like, you know, it requires a lot of idealism to be part of a group and say, everything I'm doing belongs to this group. I don't know whether, you know, I was like racking my brains and thinking, well, I've been part of lots of groups, and most of what happened in those groups is people that sat there, right, putting down their conditions for being in the group and what they expected to get back. That's what most meetings are. And I'm wondering if that's true of everybody, or if it, you know, if it was just true of my generation. I don't know. You know, I mean, were people so idealistic that they really didn't care whether they got credit, or is it just that some people were intimidated and didn't stick up for themselves? I don't know.
Well, sometimes people want to be anonymous because it's dangerous to have your name out there.
Sure. That's true. I lost some jobs because I signed my name to a sticker, you know, and I did a series of stickers against Bernard Goetz, and he came to my door because my name was on it. And I still don't remember how my name got on it. I swear I was asked to put my name on it by the people who put it out, and they swear that I insisted on putting my name on it against their advice. So it's a very strange discussion how my name ended up on those Bernard Goetz stickers. But I do know that A, I lost my work at the time for having my name on that sticker, and B, I got a visit from Bernard Goetz, which was a very weird experience. You know, he was friendly, but he, you know, he's a guy who got away with shooting people. So it doesn't matter that he's friendly, you know. It's like a weird thing to have him knock on your door.
Wow. Wow. Anyway, I learned an enormous amount doing this. There were a lot of things I didn't know about the Black Panther Party. The idea, I was completely astounded by the story of that the Black Panther was designed by a white Jewish woman, and just the story of them going to the zoo and poking at the panther. I mean, I would never. They will never let you do that today, but it was very funny in a way. Like, that was quite a story, and I just it just was I just really enjoyed doing the research for it. So I have a Facebook page called Political Art that this talk was advertised on, and all the pictures from this talk and more I'm going to put up on the page. There's albums, and I'm going to put up new albums for, you know, all the sections of this talk. I'll do an album for the May 68 in Paris, and an album for the Black Panthers, and so forth. So if you want to see anything from this talk, it might take me a few days to get it all up, but I'm going to put it all up there. And if you and of course you should follow my page, and you should click the little like button when you look at something, because I can't tell whether anybody saw it if they don't click the like button. So anyway, thank you.
Gotta go anyway.
Okay, I love
Glad
you.
I came.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seth and Tamara, do you want to stay on for a few minutes?
Sure.
Sure.
But maybe we'll stop recording.
Yeah,
Um,
while I have you here. Other people can listen too. It's not a big secret.
Okay, gotta go. Thanks so much, and bye,
Yeah.
and bye, Deb. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
what's up, Sue?
Yeah, you disappeared. Your pictures disappeared.
Took a picture off.
Oh,
That's
I
weird.
Well,
It's
I hit the
over
wrong
here.
thing.
Click
Okay.
that there.
put
I
that.
thought I'd stop the,
Just love to. It was
video
really good
recording.
and really
I didn't.
fun.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
Well, we'll just mm,
Yeah.
we'll edit it
Yeah, we'll edit
off.
it out. So,
Yeah. So hi.
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 So what's going on is really interesting here.
Yeah.
I ended up. I mean, this has kind of been brewing for a while. So I'm working with a friend of mine who is Ojibwe from like in Ashland, where I
Mhm.
used to live. And she's the one who built the giant jingle dancer woman, like I don't know, 14-foot high dancer puppet, together with Chris Lutter Gardella from Puppet Making World in Minneapolis. So Catherine wrote she's somebody who is very, very able to write grants. And so she wrote like a 5-year grant for tribal culture and bringing indigenous people and non-indigenous people together.
Wow.
And wants to do it around puppet stuff in the areas, in the tribal areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so somehow I am part of this project
Mm-hmm.
because people like the fish puppets that I made.
You made beautiful.
And then the comic strip, the water protector story, she wanted to get a grant to reprint it and give it to all the tribal high schools in Wisconsin.
Mm.
Cool.
Yeah, so I mean, people kind of know I have a read on what's going on, and so we're starting to design giant props, like a giant black snake puppet, out of which jingle dancers will the head will get chopped off, and jingle dancers will emerge.
Wow.
she has very, very ambitious ideas about what to build. But
Mhm.
she did the 14-foot jingle dancer. That's absolutely fantastic. So I kind of have this little bit of disbelief, like, oh my God, is she really thinking this is going to happen? But then she'll like email stuff that shows that she absolutely knows how to make it happen.
Mm.
And then, so it's the same, it's the pipelines that I wrote about in Water Protectors. And so there's occupation camps in like 5 different sites in Minnesota at this point. Even in this weather, people are getting arrested. And our plan is to get together in April after our immunization shots are fully active.
Wow.
Now, Jim lives, a half an hour away from Ashland. So I can go up and stay with Jim, which is also in the plans,
Mm-hmm.
and then go and build puppets in Ashland
Mm.
for a period of time. And so that's what's on the front burner right now in terms of the magazine.
Okay.
Everything else.
Wow.
Cool.
It's like, I should only have the strength to do this, right?
I hear you. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm doing I'm teaching 2 classes, both of which are tomorrow. One is at 6:30 in the morning.
Right, good.
Because like all our Asian students decided to stay in China. You wonder why.
Yeah.
So, so we're given a choice. You can either teach your class at 6:30 in the morning or at 6:30 at night. And I took 6:30 in the morning because otherwise I would have no life. We'd have no life together if I work after dinner. I just stopped working after dinner on principle.
But you're teaching May Day after dinner.
Yes, I am teaching May Day after dinner. It's true, but nonetheless.
Put out the word, both of you.
But anyways, so like
We need button designs and we need poster designs against the pipelines.
Okay.
Wait, what'd she say?
Say that again.
We need poster designs and we need button designs against Enbridge pipelines.
I have a pipeline design.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I made it for Sane, but they probably wouldn't mind if you use that.
Actually, you'd have to take Brooklyn out of the back and put something else in the back.
That's
I
fine.
told you I made it.
Oh, you made one without it. That's right.
yeah.
Okay, so she's already got one.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a group. There's an art group.
One
Yeah.
is if you send me a lot of information, I can do something. But another possibility is, would somebody want to talk to my May Day class, which is a political comics class, and get like people working on poster designs?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, then there has to be somebody for my students to interview. And let me pull up the dates that are available. Hold on.
No, I can do it.
You can do it. Okay, well, the dates would be either March 3rd or
This
March
is February.
10th. Oh, yeah, I know, but I'm looking down the bottom of the, see there.
I'm mixed
so March 3rd or March 10th.
What time?
That would be that would be on at 6:30 p.m.
6:30 in New York, so it's 5:30 here.
Yeah. And I'm going to be training the students on how to conduct an interview. And so you would do an interview, you'd provide any information you wanted them to have, if you want to send them links, if you want to send them documents, if you want to send them photo reference, give them everything they need, and then they would be producing a piece of art about it. And some of it would be useful and some of it wouldn't.
That sounds great.
Kim has made huge use of their stuff. A big part of what made the thing with Kim work is that she had She was doing stuff about the North Brooklyn pipeline, and she had a couple different people from the coalition there for them to interview. I can pay people for that time. I'm willing to put out $100. So if you have one person, they can get 100. If you have two people, they can each get 50, however you want to do it, or if you want me to just give it to the organization. The students have paid me for the time. So I can pass that on.
And they can give it to the bail fund. You can give it to the bail fund.
So what are you saying?
You can just give it to the bail fund.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it would be good to have a few people. You know, I mean, obviously you, but you're also a cartoonist. I'd love to have someone who's not a cartoonist, who people would really interview, you know? Saying.
Somebody who knows who's been working
And
in
also to make them do a
organization.
little work to, like, you're going to give people information in such an easy form because you know, you're a communications person, but I want them to do a little work, you know, and interview somebody and find something out, you know, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay, so the other group I'm working with is there's an artist group out of the Twin Cities. That's people who are doing artwork and also going up to do aid to the frontline workers. Do you know Dio Kramer at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Dio Kramer is like the artist who did a lot of the good work in Minnesota for the tribes. And Dio turns out to be Pete Seeger's great-granddaughter.
Okay.
And she's like 20-something, and she's
All
really
right.
good.
Okay.
So she organized this meeting, and there were 60 people on the Zoom call, and most of them were around 20.
Okay.
So like early 20s, mid 20s, a couple of younger. So there's a group who's designing stuff and attended the meeting, but not a lot of stuff is coming out of it at this point. But it was nice to see a whole generation of people stepping up.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people going up and doing direct action and blocking the construction equipment and getting busted.
So this is also anti-pipeline work.
This is anti-pipeline, yeah.
Okay.
Indigenous and women and Two-Spirit people led.
Mm-hmm. If you want to send me a whole bunch of information about the issue, I'll try to come up with a graphic of my own. It won't be this week because this week is really booked, but you know, within a month or something. And also, let's set up a date for you to talk to the class.
Well, March 10th would probably be better.
Okay.
Gives me a little more time. And I'll ask Catherine. And if it's Catherine, she could use the money. She has no money.
Okay, cool.
So she knows how to do this stuff too. She has Zoom and all that stuff.
And then we can make all the artwork available to you guys.
Right.
You know.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean.
I talked about this before, but it didn't have any particular focus.
Yeah.
And this would be really good.
Yeah, I mean, the May Day class has gone in a really interesting direction. At this point, there are about half the class are people who've taken it twice before.
Oh, okay.
Having a bit of a cult. It's a bit strange. You know?
We need the community.
Yeah.
A lot of people are.
Yeah.
A lot of people are desperate to talk to their friends.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, I thought we weren't going to do it this time because what happened when the lockdown happened, it was the second time I taught the class, and there was one student who was taking it for a second time, which was Annabelle, whose work you've seen.
Yeah.
World War III. And Annabelle was taking it for a second time, and we had this weird situation where the first day of the class, at the end of the day, it was announced that Mayday Space is shutting down. And then we had to decide whether to keep going, and we decided to keep going on Zoom. And Mayday was ready to give everyone their money back, which is a lot better than SVA offered people, I'll tell you. They were ready to refund everyone. I mean, they're so virtuous, right? And it turned out there were like 3 people who didn't want to do Zoom, and they got refunded and everyone else took the class. But it was like total, it was total chaos that month, right? You remember that month. And I was trying to figure out what to do, and Annabelle went out and lined up all kinds of people to be interviewed, like healthcare workers and doctors and stuff.
I remember
right?
that was
And
good.
I was like, this thing of having someone who's a previous student is so useful that I decided from now on, we're going to say people who've taken the class before can take it again for free. And so we did it again, and there were a few people taking it for free. And then this time it turned out like only, I think, 5 new people came in. I said, well, that's not enough people to do it. So I think we're going to have to shut it down. And then all of a sudden, all the people who were taking it again said, oh, we'll pay for it. So
that's great.
It was like a complete endorsement of what we've been doing. But
she's such a great
she
teacher.
organized that. She went to them. I know she did.
I did. I said, hey, there's not enough students to take the class. I didn't tell them you paid for the class. I said, let's find more people, post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter, ask your friends, let's find some more students so this class can continue. That's what I said.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's continued. And so I think that group of people would be really good for what you're doing. Like they were people who didn't want to do.
Plus, I need to be in touch with people. I need to be.
Yeah. So the other thing that's happening is that we're doing this rush job for Mumia.
Yeah, right I'm the inker.
And that people have written a petition to Larry Krasner to drop the case. It's apparently within his power to drop the case and send him home. Of course, that's probably political suicide for him for the rest of his life. They're going to hang that on his neck that he does that, but he can actually do it. He can just say, there's nothing here. We're not pursuing the case. At this point, that's where it stands legally. He could end the case right now if he decided to. So I'm illustrating that petition so that we're rushing to do that right now. And, but it's been really nice getting in touch with a lot of the old Mumia crew.
Yes.
Some of which remember me from being in Europe, which is really weird. I had a conversation with someone who I did not remember. Like, oh yeah, you painted something on the side of our building in Bern. I'm like, what the fuck, So it's kind of cool. But that's been an interesting thing. That it seems like something is possible with Mumia now, which is very, very strange.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. If you have any Mumia artwork that's lying around and you want to send it to me, they're about to put out a publication and I could send it on.
I don't. I have.
A lot of people did stuff.
An anti-death penalty thing, but that's.
Well, the death penalty has not been a Mumia problem for about 10 years now, because they overturned the death sentence a while ago. But I don't know if you followed it, that they found these 6 new boxes of evidence.
Yeah, I spend so much time following stuff. I have plenty of time on my hands.
Right. Then the whole contradictions around Larry Kramer then.
Yeah.
And that it's a really complicated situation because he is the prosecutor, but he could have shredded those files. He never had to release those files. And I think the FOP is furious that he didn't shred those files because their people would have done that.
Well, yeah.
So it's very weird, it's like,
yes.
Is he a friend? Is he an enemy? What is he, and how do we deal with him? Where everyone's trying to figure it out. you know. But yeah, so we're doing that, and I guess did you put in which of those dates you're available for a meeting for the new issue?
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen
I, it,
right.
aren't you on the World War III Ed Board email list? Don't you get the editorial board emails?
I'm off it as of the last two issues. So
You're off it?
yeah, well, I'm not on that. I
You're
haven't.
not on the listserv. Okay, then I will put you on the listserv.
Yeah, thanks. Good.
Because Ethan just showed me how to put people on and take people off the listserv, which I didn't know. But I always assumed you were on the listserv.
I was 2 years ago, but then
It stopped?
yeah.
That's weird. I don't think the only person who knew how to adjust that was Ethan, and he wasn't paying any attention at all. So I don't know how that would
Have
happen.
taken me off when I withdrew from the the.
Okay, so
So
I will send it on to you, but I put 3 possible dates, both of which are in the first week of March, for a World War III Zoom meeting to talk about the next issue.
okay, I should be free.
But there are 3 different dates, so you know, people are to tell us which of those dates they can do. But I'm really disturbed that you're not on the listserv. I thought you were always on the listserv. Thank you for telling me. I had no idea.
I used to be.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
That's really weird. But we'll figure it out. Okay.
Well,
Thank you for letting me know. I will.
and that's
You'll
why.
hear from me Thursday, because tomorrow is 2 classes and tomorrow is completely crazy. But
My life is one long day. It's one long day. It just keeps on going, and I'm eating too much.
oh,
Yeah.
Exercising, not enough.
You look healthy.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I went on a 3-mile walk last week.
Oh, wow. Great.
Good for you.
So I had artwork in a book on teachers unions with Rethinking Schools people. And then I've had artwork in all these books lately. And then it's just one thing after another. And now somebody is writing for, I don't even know what he's writing for. Somebody who's a real popular weirdo writer who writes about haunted houses and draws weird comics here is interviewing me for some major publication or magazine. Because I'm now like one of the famous Wisconsin comics artists.
Great.
Out. After having artwork in there was the Museum of Wisconsin art show. It was like the best of kitchen sink press. And then it had like 4 people who are in the contemporary period still doing work. So I'm like the person who's like living and doing stuff. And they did a projection piece of the Trump the Cossack in a gallery in like a really fancy hotel downtown.
Cool.
It's supposed to be during the DNC. Why they had it. So anyhow, they published.
Whoa! Wow. Cool.
So then they published a catalog with all the work in it, a full comic strip, and then all this stuff from the 70s. And then the other people who are contemporary were Milo Miller, who's Queer Zine Archive Project. And they're the people who came and visited us when we were they walked from the West Village to the East Village when we had the publication party at the 6th Street Community Center. It's the same place.
Okay, yeah.
And then like there were 2 other contemporary people, or 1 other contemporary person. But anyhow, so I'm the only one who's like here now still doing stuff. And the one, the Foxconn piece got a lot of press here.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, so it's really weird. I mean, I'm so Wisconsin now.
Yeah. Did you ever do the interview with Fifth Estate people?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't think I ever got the link.
Oh,
I would have publicized it. Send me the link.
okay. Well, it's just, you look up aerobics,
Uh-huh.
and then there'll be the link for that.
Huh. Okay.
So yeah, it was okay. It was kind of not real pointed. It was just kind of all over the place, but it was okay. So there's this, it keeps me going.
Yeah.
All this stuff going on. And
Okay.
then it's just,
I should probably be signing out because I got to get up for a 6:30 in the morning class.
tired.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, he's the early bird.
Well, it was really fun and a really fun public thing to do because it was just, I remember all the images.
Mm.
So there was a kaleidoscope image, not kaleidoscope, a mandala image on one of them that you showed for gay liberation.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Same mandala was on the back of the rack.
Oh.
So in other words, somebody lifted it?
Lifted it and somebody lifted it again and somebody else lifted it. And I'm not sure where it came from, but we used it.
So who knows where that originally was, huh?
No, I have her name. I put her name.
But they lifted it.
It was by a woman.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote her name.
But it's funny. I mean, the stuff just went everywhere.
It's going everywhere, all over the internet now. You put something on the internet, and if it's popular, it gets everywhere, usually without the artist name.
The piece I did about no evictions took off.
Oh,
Cool. I bet.
It's been
would you send that to me, or is it on your Facebook or something?
yeah, it's if you just look up my name on Google Images,
Okay.
image search for me, you'll see it. It got reprinted in like Portland and then another city. David Rovics was behind it, and they pasted it all over the city, and then some other image.
Great.
So the internet has served me well.
Yes, good.
So I've been really content with artwork just going out all over the place, but there's a lot of inertia about doing like a whole new body of work. Except the puppets. I mean,
puppets are art.
no, but it's kind of like getting together and teaching the skills to like whole loads of Native American teenagers. Sounds really appealing. Sounds like
that's
really
great.
fun. And then they get taken to the front lines against the pipelines.
Wow.
Cool.
And Catherine is just really, she's easy to work with because she's got a lot of energy.
Cool.
Great.
So it's not like I'm doing stuff and just trying to get tribal people to like adopt it or something. It's just I've been really invited in.
That's perfect. That's
really nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because I've been doing stuff around those issues for like 30 something years, 40 years, something crazy.
Actually, it's not amazing. It makes sense that they would invite you.
I'm not very threatening to a movement that's all older women.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you have a track record, you know.
Yeah.
Nobody can doubt your commitment. Nobody can doubt your competence, you know.
It feels good.
You know, and I would imagine that on a local level, people know what your role has been in organizations and what you've done.
Yeah, it's really good. And I'm in a neighborhood of people, you know, we have history together. So things are, things are developing and changing, but there's still like a core of people who've been working together for decades.
That's
And,
really
what you visited River West, Seth, so you get an idea for what it's like. A lot of the people, younger people, left and then they came back.
yeah.
Anyhow, get some rest and we'll be in touch.
Okay, and we'll make this video available to everybody, and we'll just cut off the personal conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, and the video will be available.
I'm just so glad the two of you are together and keeping each other company through all of this craziness.
Yeah, it's, we've been doing. We're like, I'm doing way too well, considering that the world's ending. It's like, this is like, it doesn't make sense. It's like,
Love it.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll
right.
talk to you Thursday.
Okay,
Okay.
bye.
Bye.